Hi there everybody, I'm Danny Blackburn. I'm a content director at Stickyeyes, and I'm here today to talk about content, and very specifically about how you can use content to drive SEO success. Now, I know you're probably all thinking another conference talk about content and how it can earn you loads of money, heal the sick, save the world and all that stuff. Well, you'll be pleased to know that this is not going to be that talk, because I'm really sick to death of hearing talks about content being some sort of silver bullet, because it's really not. When I hear the phrase content is king, it honestly makes me want to punch myself in the face. It's quite meaningless, and it's actually quite dangerous because it gives you this impression that creating content, the simple act of just doing that, is somehow going to deliver loads of benefits, and that's not the case. And if we kind of perpetuate that story, then there's a danger that content marketing and content becomes some sort of snake oil, some kind of magical solution to everything, and clearly that's not the case. But what content is a toolbox. It's a collection of hundreds and thousands of individual tools, individual levers, all of which can do very different and very specific things in terms of driving SEO performance. So from kind of product pages, category pages, through to infographics, ebooks, Snapchat stories, the whole works. Content can do lots of different things. The question is, which of those tools you need to use, which of those strategic levers you need to pull to deliver your specific objectives. Now, the way that we kind of approach that is by really starting to look at the insights, diving into the data to understand what you need to do. Now, I'm a journalist by training, so I spent years trying to hone this kind of gut instinct for what's going to work, what's going to resonate, what are people going to be interested in. But we don't need to do that anymore. We can really use all of the data that's out there to make sure that we're not just going on hunches, we're actually using data to tell us what is the kind of content that we should be creating to deliver these specific SEO objectives. Now, the way that we do that is by focusing in three kind of key areas. Performance insights. Now, that's looking specifically and using data to tell us, well, what do we need to do in order to drive SEO performance? Then there's audience insights. So what is actually going to resonate with your specific audience? And then there's brand insights, which is what makes your brand special and different and better. And that gives you a sense of, well, what you've got a right to create content around. So let's walk through those one by one. So starting with performance insights. Now, I don't want to get into a really in-depth discussion about ranking factors today, but in a nutshell, we kind of, our view is that search performance at the highest level is impacted by these kind of 5 key groups of factors. So technical proficiency, content depth and relevancy, authority and trust, so all those linking things that we've been talking about earlier today, user engagement, and then user experience. Now, I want to take this opportunity to say just how important those technical elements of SEO still are. So unless you've got your technicals absolutely nailed and really, really well done, then there's not a lot of point starting to do content strategies. You need to make sure those technicals are right. But beyond technicals, content can start to have an impact in all of these different areas. So if those are the factors that drive SEO performance, it's really important to understand how your site and your competitors perform on all those levels. So what we do is use what we call an SEO Proficiency Scorecard. And what we do is we're measuring the site based on its authority, its relevancy, its engagement, and its UX. And then we kind of stack that on top of each other. We then kind of look at the same measurements for the competitors in your market. And that gives us a really clear idea of what you need to do with content in order to perform better in search. So you can see here that brand X sports nutrition is performing moderately well in terms of SEO proficiency with 56% compared to 66% for the market leader in this particular space. Now, the purple shaded area there, that is search visibility. So what you can see here is that as that search proficiency score goes down, as does the search visibility. So we can also look at some of the specifics here. So brand X is actually quite deficient compared to the market leader in terms of authority and also in terms of relevancy. And the final thing we can take away from this analysis is that the actual engagement, the visibility of Brandex is actually down there where that, the dotted red line is. And you can see that the search proficiency of 56% is actually similar to the search proficiency of this brand here, which is much more visible. So that can point to some technical gremlins, and in this case it was some dodgy hreflang and some link profile issues. But the key takeaway here for me as a content person is that we need to really focus on a content strategy that drives authority and relevancy. So, how do we do that? Knowing what you need to do isn't necessarily the same as actually being able to do it. So that's why we need to really, really focus on creating content that's going to resonate. Now to do that, this is where the audience insights come in. So we often talk to brands and they say, yeah, we've got our audience insights nailed. We know exactly who they are. And they give us something like this. And that's a really great start, but there's much, much more to, well, human beings than those kind of key top-level demographics. So we're asking these kind of questions. Who are they? Where are they active on digital? Why are they interested in you as a brand? There's so many, thousands and thousands of different questions that can help build a really rounded picture of who your audience are. You can then start to subdivide it into multiple different personas. Go as granular as you've got time for, as granular as you want. Now, we've got a tool that helps us do that. We call it Pinpoint. But essentially, what it does is it just stitches together all of these publicly accessible data points, so Global Web Index, the social networks, YouGov, so on and so forth. And I'm not going to spin through kind of a load of examples, because you'll know these tools, and you'll know how they work, and you know the outputs yourselves. But what we're really trying to get at here is a really kind of deep and implicit understanding of this audience, and particularly in terms of their digital behavior. Now, oh, no, this is supposed to say, beware kittens. The point I'm trying to make here is that just because people are interested in something doesn't mean that every brand should be creating content around it. Now, clearly, everyone likes kittens. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every brand should be creating content about kittens. Although, if you can find an angle to create content about kittens, do. Because it always works. Cute little bastards. Okay, so the next phase is looking at the brand insights. Where do you have that authority to talk? Where do you have a right to create content? So this is pretty simple stuff, and there's loads of kind of little tools and mechanics that you can use to really get to the heart of that. But essentially, it's all about understanding, well, what does your brand stand for? What is your audience interested in? And then creating content in the space where those things overlap. Now, American Express, not a client of ours, they do a really, really good job of this. They've got that deep understanding of what the brand stands for, and they've also got a lot of understanding of what their audience actually wants in their own lives. And that's allowed them, with some kind of good old-fashioned creativity, to create some really nice content. So Passion Project, Shop Small, it's worth looking at some of these projects out there. So, we know what we need to do from a performance perspective. We understand the audience, and we've got a sense of what the brand's all about. So how do we turn that into a content strategy? Now, we always start with this. The internet is a great place to hide content, because it's true. The number of brands that we come to and we look at who are creating loads of content, they've been to the content marketing conference, they know that content is the key to success. They're creating it, nobody's seeing it. It goes unread, unused, unconsumed. So it all comes back to making sure that the content that you create is going to be consumed. Essentially, there are only two ways that you can do that. Content distribution, which is pushing content to the audience via that blend of owned, earned, and paid channels, and then content discovery, which is essentially creating content in a specific way to make sure people find it. So if you can get across both of those things, that is going to be how you ensure that your audience sees the content. So let's start with distribution. And we're really lucky at the moment in 2017 about how many different channels that we can use to distribute content. Owned, earned, paid, shared. There's so much opportunity out there. But the really critical thing is using all of those insights, performance insights, audience insights, and brand insights to work out which are the right ones to use to drive the performance that you want. So, for example, if it's authority that your insight suggests your site is deficient in, then obviously a kind of an earned strategy is going to be great, because that's how you start to generate some of those links. If it's engagement that your site might be lacking, then maybe you're going to go more down a kind of paid social route to drive a bit of engagement into the site. Well, what we find is it's usually a mix of all of those things. Now, the critical element here is also using the audience insights to choose the right channel. So, is your audience on social media? If so, which channels? Are they influenced by bloggers and vloggers? There's no one-size-fits-all, rinse and repeat version of distribution of content. You have to make sure that you're distributing the right stuff in the right channels to the right people. And this is, without doubt, the most neglected area of content strategy. Again, we see lots of brands who are spending a lot of money on content, but then not very much money on the kind of distribution of that content. And obviously, like these guys have found out, you do need to have a really effective distribution solution if you want your content to work. Now, the other side of that is about content discovery, and this is really about creating content that is going to be found. So this is when people are actively looking for stuff that is relevant to your brand. So Google have helpfully come up with this concept of micro moments, so we can't take any kind of credit for this, but it's a really, really good thing to get your head around when you're creating content. And it's really about understanding what are those key moments of relevance for your audience and your brand. I want to know, I want to do, I want to go, and I want to buy. Now, search agencies have traditionally focused very heavily on those I want to buy moments, and understandably, and quite rightly, because that's where all the kind of the revenue and the money is going to be made. But if you think about your use of search in this day and age, in terms of your smartphone, which is with you 24/7, you might have a Alexa or Google Home, search is becoming a much broader part of life. So we need to make sure about thinking about how can we engage with people? How can we use that informational search to get your brand in front of people and to drive engagement and to drive content consumption? So the way we approach that is by splitting keyword research into two very clear areas. Commercial keywords, obviously these are the kind of anything that's got that really clear commercial I want to buy intent. And then informational search, which is essentially all of the relevant keywords that fit into those other areas. Now, how do we join the dots between all those things? Now, again, we've nicked another Google and YouTube model here. So you'll have known this hero, hub, and hygiene model. It's obviously very famous. We've adapted that slightly, specifically for SEO. So what does that mean in the search kind of sphere? So hero content for us, that's really about the kind of go big content campaigns. And the primary objective of that kind of stuff is to deliver that authority, awareness, and engagement into the site. Now, hero content is 9 times out of 10 focused on distribution, so stuff that you're pushing in front of people via that blend of owned, earned, paid, and shared channels. Hub content, by comparison, is usually quite small, that regular flow, that drumbeat of engaging content, with a primary goal of improving awareness, engagement, and UX. Now, what we tend to do there is there's an element of discovery there, and there's an element of distribution. It should be, generally speaking, stuff that people are searching for to some degree, that they're interested in, and search is a great way of working that out. But it's also stuff that you can be confident is going to work when you distribute it. So all of that best practice that James was talking about earlier about what's going to resonate on social channels, that's something that you need to think about with your hub content. And then for us, hygiene content, that's very much about understanding what people are searching for and then creating really best-in-class content that's going to be aligned to doing that. So this is really about understanding those informational search moments, understanding those informational keyword sets, and then creating content to boost content depth and relevancy in those areas. So what does that look like in real life? So we've been working with Hertz for about 5 years now, and their objective to us was very, very clear, and it's always nice when you get clients with clear objectives. It was just grow organic search traffic, grow reservations, and grow revenue right across Europe. So we went through that process that I've just outlined. So what were the barriers to success? The performance insights told us that there were 4 key strategic challenges here. Poor content and depth and relevancy, weak on-site engagement. Authority was okay, but it wasn't as strong as it could be, and there were a bunch of technical issues which our technical guys could take care of. So we then moved into that audience insights piece, and that gave us a really good understanding of what makes Hertz's customers tick. So it's broad range of interests from travel, science, nature, property. They're independent and hardworking with usually kind of quite important jobs, but they believe that family is more important than anything else. And that gave us a really kind of broad context for the kind of content that we needed to create. We could also leverage some of Hertz's first-party data. So, for example, looking at the different the different locations that people hire cars from. Obviously, if you go to London Heathrow versus Palma de Mallorca, it's a different type of traveller by and large. So we could get the sense here that London Heathrow was, as you'd expect, largely about kind of business trips, and there was an element of kind of international travel as well, whereas Palma de Mallorca was much more about family holidays. And we can take all of those insights and put them into the various strands of content that we're creating. Of course, it all has to be 100% on brand. And again, this is something that we always need to take care of as content people. There's a lot of focus sometimes on what is jazzy, what's shiny, what's going to attract the attention of the media, journalists, and so on and so forth. But obviously, it's really important to make sure that any content that you're creating is absolutely true to the brand's values. So, how did that help us grow organic traffic, bookings, and revenue for Hertz? So it allowed us to create this broad approach, which was all about reaffirming the important things in life. We knew what customers, Hertz customers were defined by, so it was all about getting out there and doing things together. So this is where we ended up in terms of a content strategy for Hertz. So it's a blend of those hero, hub, and hygiene factors, because we knew from a performance insights perspective, we needed to pull a bunch of different strategic levers. Yes, we needed to drive authority in the site, but we also needed to really focus on content depth and relevancy, and then look at the engagement as well. So let's walk through those piece by piece. Now, the performance insights all pointed to the biggest area of deficiency when we started off was around that kind of content depth and relevancy point. So we had a real deep dive into what are people searching for that is relevant for this brand. And as you'd imagine, what's relevant for a car hire company right across Europe? Well, it's people searching for hiring cars, car hire London, car hire Palma de Mallorca, so on and so forth. So to be relevant with content for all of those different locations, we ended up having to create 12,000 location pages in 12 different languages. And that meant we could get right across the keyword set to make sure the site was as relevant as possible. So when we started, the functional hygiene content on the Hertz site was quite kind of typical from what you see. It's essentially a load of keyword stuffed copy on there. But what we tried to do is really evolve that to the next level and make it truly relevant and truly useful for the audience. So we ended up with something like this. So again, it's all focused on what that user is intending when they make that search. So when you search for car hire London, you've just booked a flight potentially, so you want to get your car hire sorted. So we want to make it as easy as possible. We also built in some highly engaging video, really useful and informative stuff like a guide to driving in London for people who don't know the city. There's a guide to the congestion charge, etc., etc. We had stuff like the key nuts and bolts information about where you could get the cars from, a guide to driving in London. Obviously, you have to make allowances for some of the commercial stuff, and then a guide to London as a tourist destination, taking into account all of the things that we knew Hertz customers would be interested in when they visited the city for the first time. And then we could kind of include that wider links to some of that hub content. So the hub content, this is all about, again, capitalizing on what we know the audience is interested in. So using those search insights to make sure we're talking about the right things, using those brand insights to make sure we're creating content that we know is going to actually be relevant, and then using both search and content distribution to push that to the audience. So we created the Hertz Together blog, and this is a range of different content types, from destination guides to offers to competitions, inspiration, a real broad set of engaging pieces of content. And essentially what we're doing here is just using those search insights, but then doing it in a way that we know is going to resonate. And of course, we didn't want to bury that content in a kind of a dusty corner of the site, so we've made sure that it's all kind of thoroughly integrated in the actual location pages themselves. So using all of that search volume around the actual locations as a content distribution channel in itself. This is just one example. We knew that the new Michelin star list was coming out, so we created a quick interactive map using I think it's just Google Images actually, Google Maps. But a really kind of simple piece of content and managed to generate some decent kind of coverage in everyone's favorite online website. And it's an approach that we've used time and time again to kind of make sure that we're using that content to generate that awareness and engagement and authority that we're looking for. So the final piece of the picture are these hero campaigns. And I say Hertz's authority right at the start wasn't actually that big of a problem, but we knew we needed to kind of keep building it as we go. So that's where these campaigns came into effect. So city swap, simple idea. We take journalists, bloggers, travel writers in one city, and we get them to swap with a journalist or a blogger from another city, and then cover that experience on their own channels. And that gave us some really, really great results right across Europe, so all these great titles. And this is the latest campaign that we're working on at the moment. So this is essentially an interactive road trip planning tool. Now, again, this is all based on insights. What do people do when they go to the US? Well, they hire a car and they do a road trip. It's the most popular activity for people, particularly on the West Coast. So what we wanted to do is create a tool that would rank for that kind of stuff. So it's interactive. You can choose your interests, and then it will suggest a bunch of curated itineraries based on your personal interests. And we're using this for lots and lots of different reasons. So it's obviously great from a kind of an engagement perspective. We've also got several strands of outreach and PR activity built into this thing. And it's also proving pretty useful as a kind of just a valuable content resource as it is, so it's already generating some decent rankings. So that's just a sense of the kind of stuff that we've been doing for Hertz over the last 5 years. And what that has done, by using those data insights to create content that we know is going to resonate with people across those different strands, and pull those specific strategic levers of authority and engagement and content depth and relevancy, that's allowed us to deliver some really solid results for these guys. So increase in traffic from organic search is up 148% over those 5 years. And you can see how that's kind of grown over time with the kind of search seasonality taken into account. And that's resulted in a 173% increase in sales from organic search right across Europe. So that's the blueprint, basically. It's about using those insights, performance insights, audience insights, and brand insights to create the right strategy, the right content that is going to pull the levers that you need to move the needle in search. It's simple, really. It's the right content in front of the right people in the right places at the right times. But it's not easy. You need to use that data, and then, yeah, you need good people with really good ideas and are experienced and can actually execute brilliantly. And do that, that's what will drive the right results. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much.